A very warm welcome. It's Tessa here, and today I'm going to be interviewing Julia because she has been running her women's circle for 6 months, so celebrating that. And I wanted to hear all about it, and I thought it would be very useful for people who are thinking about starting their own circle to learn from Julia's experience. So let's just start with some basics. Tell me about the circle. Who did you invite? How long was it?
So my thinking was that I wanted to have beginner's mind alongside all the people that we work for and work with in circle holding. And I had a women's circle pre-lockdown. And when lockdown happened, it was a daytime circle, and the majority of people who came along were people who've got young children, and it wasn't feasible to change it and put it online. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to rekindle a women's circle in my studio, which is where I teach yoga. And I wanted it to be for the local community. And I thought I would get the majority of people coming who have come to yoga classes with me, or go to yoga classes with me, or like the idea of a bit of yoga. Um, and I chose a Thursday evening because it was an evening that would work well for me. And I chose monthly because that felt like the right period of time between circles. And that's what I did last time. And I chose 2 hours because I felt that that was spacious enough to explore something in the circle. And 7:30 till 9:30 felt like a good time in the evening because it meant that people with children who needed to put them to bed could potentially put them to bed in time to come out, and it could potentially give people enough time maybe to eat something before they came out as well. And in my mind, I imagined that people would be walking from the local streets to come to the class. And that's kind of the way I shared it as well. I kind of spoke to people in my local community. I used there's a forum called Nextdoor, which I don't use very often actually, but I did use Nextdoor and I shared it on Nextdoor. And I emailed it to my yoga mailing list. And also I started talking to friends that I don't necessarily talk to about my yoga classes, and told them what I was planning to do as well. And that's kind of how it came about. September felt like a good time to do it. It's the kind of the beginning of the school year. It's always felt like the beginning of the year for me. And that's kind of where the seed started.
Because even when you're experienced in circle facilitation, when you start up a new one, it can often be a sort of nerve-wracking process because you think, is anybody going to turn up at this new time? Or so, how were you feeling before that first one?
Yeah, I think there are nerves attached to it. I even had to think about things like, how much am I going to charge for it? And how many is my maximum number? And yeah, who's going to come? Because actually what did happen was that there were 12 people who came along, including me. That was my max numbers to the first circle. And it was a real variety of people. There were people who came to that circle who I had never met before. There was even somebody who came along to the circle who I hadn't really had a like I'd messaged her and she'd messaged back, but I didn't know much more about her than that she wanted to come to the circle. We hadn't had a conversation, but I still was happy for her to come along. So there was somebody I didn't know at all. There was somebody I'd had a conversation with but didn't really know. There was a mother, so there was meant to be a mother and daughter coming along. And what happened is that the daughter decided that she didn't want to go with her mother, and that it would be better for her. I can understand that. Sometimes we want space from our relations, but that it would be a really lovely thing for her mum. Um, so it definitely, I think I only had one person from my yoga class come along, and that was the person who really, really wanted a women's circle and had said to me, come on, like, I really want this, come and do it. So she came along. But there was no one else from my actual, regular contingent of students that came along. People were coming because they wanted a women's circle. They weren't coming because they knew me, went to yoga, and thought it might be a nice addition to what they do. It's a much more separate demographic than I thought it would be.
Yeah, and I want to acknowledge how when you don't know the people that are coming, it's a bigger step because you don't know whether they're going to get where you're coming from, or it's so different when I'm running something where I do know most of the people because they've come through my yoga classes. Like, oh yes, know that name, know that name. And then sometimes you, like you talked about, completely new set of people. And you're like, well, take a deep breath, let's go for it and hope it goes well. Yeah, so well done.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah.
So it's been going for a while, and I'm wondering, are there things that you would say have been challenging, or things that you've needed to change, or things that you weren't expecting?
I think at the beginning, it can be really nice to want something, but you can't, I kind of felt I couldn't do what I thought I wanted. So for my nervous system, it's always nice to know that I'm going to get the same people coming every week, and that they've all booked in for 6 months, and that they all want to do it, and that I don't have to worry about it from week to week. But this was a new endeavor. And what I found over the months is that the people who have come have changed. There's been some people who've come to most of the circles, some people who've come to one and haven't come back, and some people who've kind of come along the way. And I've made a decision for the moment that I can always change, that even though my nervous system doesn't love the fact that people do things at the last minute and say they're going to come and then maybe don't, I like the fact that there are active choices being made every month to come to Circle, and that it's open enough for new people to potentially come along. So my idea at the beginning is that quite early on, there'd be a set number of people, and those people would come every month. And now my idea is that there's potentially quite a decent sized pool of people who could potentially come, who know what it is, most of whom have had the experience of coming along, so that between 6 and 12 people will be there every week, and that I can trust that the people who'll be there will be the ones who are meant to be there. So that's something that's changed in my mindset, and I'm becoming more comfortable with. Because I kind of like the idea that, like, for instance, actually this week, someone who'd come the month before was then going to bring a friend. The friend couldn't come at the last minute, but the friend's going to come next time. And I like the idea of people coming, experiencing the circle, enjoying it, and then going, oh, I really enjoyed that. I'm going to bring my friend along to it. So yeah, that's something that's changed.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting reflection, because often things do take a while to settle, don't they, with something like a talking circle anyway, because people have to come and try it and see if it's for them and what they expected, managing people's expectations.
Yeah, a few people have come, really expressed how much they've enjoyed the experience, and that's been the only time they've come. And I've got to accept that that's okay, and that they made a real difference to the space that we created at that time. And that was what they needed. I know that there's one person who came to one circle, and she's got extremely young children and a really busy life. And that was a circle that she could make. And I don't want to close the circle, because what if she can make one 2 or 3 months down the line? I know that she loves it, but I know that it's not within her bandwidth to come every month.
Yeah, and I think it's very common with childcare. I have a number of people in my women's circle at the moment who would love to come, but it just isn't working out with the evening, and another person who, because of work, has a very early start the next morning. And she's not been for about 6 months, and she's going to come back again. I'm so excited. So
Yeah.
yeah, kind of I think we have to do what works for ourselves first as the facilitator. Like you said, you picked an evening that would work for you. And then, it's going to work for some people and not for others. So that's okay.
Yeah, and I think this is the only circle that I run that is very specifically called a women's circle. And there have been people who've come along to the circle and they've said, the reason why I'm here is because it's a women's circle. I want this space for that reason. And that's been interesting, especially as there are people who aren't women who I know would love the circle, but it's okay for me to have chosen to do that, because for those people who really want a women's circle, that's what it's there for. And it creates a space where we can talk about things that are exclusively female body related. So that's really nice.
And I know at some point you were thinking whether to be on the floor or on seats. And that's an issue of inclusivity as well, isn't it? If you were planning to sit on the floor, but then there's somebody who would just be really uncomfortable or can't actually get down onto the floor. So what was your thinking process around that?
So I started with loads of bolsters and blankets and things that facilitating sitting comfortably and being up against the wall. And I do run a class that's for people who are, it's called my over 60s class, but I have people who are over 80. And they can get up and down off the floor. But when we do the relaxation practices, there's a huge amount of props that I use to make sure that everybody's comfortable to meditate or to relax. So I am used to people who are not necessarily easy in on the floor being in my classes. But what happened is that there was one person who really did need to sit on a chair. And then there was somebody else who ended up twisting their ankle, hurting their ankle, and they needed to sit on a chair. And so I moved from being floor-based to actually bringing the last two circles I've brought chairs in. And it's really interesting because another person in that group said after the last circle, she felt like there was too much sitting and her back didn't feel comfortable by the end of the time. And so she's actually somebody who's done our circle facilitation training. She comes along and really wants to be part of the makeup of the circle. And we had a little chat, and we're going to be more purposeful about putting movement breaks in, and when the sharing happens, giving space and time for noticing how our body's feeling, maybe doing a bit of havening, like hugging ourselves. And actually, from having that conversation with her, it made me realize that when we're in an in-person circle, the whole idea of us actually being bodies is something that comes up. We've talked in the circle about whether it's appropriate to hug somebody when they've shared something that's deep and emotional. And when we've spoken about it outside of the circle, like let's make sure there's a little bit more movement, we've talked about what we can do for ourselves. So in a maybe normal conversation with a friend might say something, she might get upset, and then we might move to hug them. And in a circle situation, somebody might speak, but we're creating safe enough safe enough boundaries for them, and it might not be appropriate to hug them, but it could be appropriate for us to hug ourselves or something like that after a deeper share. So there's a lot more thought that has had to go into our physical presence in the room than would from running an online circle.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting, because I think over the pandemic, I heard a lot of people saying they liked online circles because they felt very safe in their own environments. And so they were really controlling sort of their nervous system when they were part of a circle. But there were also some people that didn't come to any of the online ones. They were like, no, it has to be in person. I have to be able to kind of be able to see the body language and just feel the presence of other people very close to me.
Yeah, there's been something very special about the proximity that we all live to each other. I mean, it's really special that I've held circles with people who are all over the world online. I feel really privileged, and especially people who are from isolated places. I think that's something we both really experience, is that people come along to our trainings or our courses or our circles, and they're quite far away from other people. So this is an amazing opportunity. With this, one of my reasons for doing it was to build my local community so that I had a lovely network of local people. And there's something really special about us being together. The relationships build much more quickly when you have circle. It feels like you know somebody so much better after you've had 3 or 4 circles with them, rather than having just met them at a party or met them another way. And then everyone's near to each other. So my imagination, everyone's got the opportunity to meet each other outside of circle and do lovely things with each other, and it builds all those really nice connections. So that's a real positive of an in-person circle, is that it's for the local community.
I remember you saying the last circle was particularly special. Can you share a bit about why you think that was?
I think there were people who came to the circle who were really brave. I think it's a brave step. It's so much more of a brave step to come into circle than we really think it is. And they came into circle with real vulnerability, and I have a huge amount of respect for everybody who was there, because there was deep sharing that occurred from various people, and there was a real honoring of their need to share and their confidentiality and respecting their boundaries. And we had the opportunity to do the talking, do the listening, and also for the people who were doing the deep sharing, one of the people asked the question of another, I feel like I've shared a lot. Do you feel the burden of my sharing? And the other person said, no, I feel a privilege to have listened to you. And that was kind of the essence of what that evening felt like. It felt like a real privilege to be part of that space where we all felt safe enough to share deeply, be there for each other. And it felt like a positive experience. It felt like a good experience.
Yeah, it sounds like some real alchemy happened.
I think there's something about January and full moons as well. It was a January full moon. Yeah.
So you're going to be running that for the foreseeable future, are you?
I am. And actually, one other thing that I think might be helpful to hear is that to be brave enough to run the circle, I actually, there's a local woman who's a reflexologist. And for the first couple of circles, we ran it as a kind of partnership. And then the Thursday evenings didn't work so well for her. And maybe the community that she expected to come didn't come. And we've maintained a friendship, a relationship. She's a brilliant reflexologist. I'm definitely going to be going back for reflexology. And she may come to circles in the future, but we've actually gone from deciding to start up the circle together to me running the circle and her possibly popping in when she wants to. So I think you can make a decision to run something as a collaborative, and that collaborative can not happen going forward. And it can be okay. Like there's no falling out, there's no bad blood at all. It just was something that ended up working for me and not so much working for her. And she's likely to come along and do a little bit of something around reflexology in a future circle. And instead of having one person to share the circle with, what I've started to do is people who are part of the circle are starting to take over aspects of the circle instead. So it's not entirely my responsibility. So, for example, that person who said, I'd really like a little bit of more somatics, when she feels in the room that we need to move around, she's likely to be the one to say, come on, let's get up off our chairs and have a little wiggle and a move, or to share a little bit of a practice like that. And we've kind of got a break in the middle. So we have a beginning section, and then in the middle, we share some snacks that everybody's brought. People bring their own drink because of the way that the venue set up. It doesn't really work with me making teas and coffees. And I think it takes too long as well to start boiling a kettle. It's much better for people to come with their own drink, and it's a chance for people to have a quick loo break. And then after that, there's a space where somebody else can take over, because 2 hours is actually quite a long time. And for me, I felt like it would be nice if I didn't hold the space myself for that entire 2 hour period.
Mm. Yeah, and I also want to acknowledge that, yeah, you have to resource yourself, don't you, as a facilitator? So I love the fact that you kind of bringing in other people. That means that you get a bit of a break in facilitating. I'm just wondering how you're sort of resourcing yourself outside of the circle as well, because I know evenings are precious to you. So to take a sort of Thursday evening, is another time that although you're benefiting from it, you are working still. So how do you kind of balance everything?
I think for me, it was about having the time in my life where it was the right time for me to do it. So I've got practically adult children. I think 18 and 20 counts as adults now, doesn't it? So when they were younger, I was much more protective of my evening time, or not even protective. I was responsible for other people during my evening time. There was a lot of fetching and carrying and being around and needing to parent and doing bedtime. I think it would be much harder for me to do a women's circle at 7:30 if I was putting my children to bed straight before then, or if I was responsible for making dinner for everybody that night before doing it. So I think there is a space in my life where it works and it's good. But also, I think even though I'm really aware of the responsibility of running circle, I didn't think how much work it would be. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of planning that goes into it. There's a lot of previous knowledge that I'm using in the circle. So it's a lot easier than it would be, because I didn't have to learn how to be a circle holder before doing it. I'm not, there are things I'm experiencing learning. I think you constantly learn as a circle holder, but there are things that I know. So I'm not, I'm not scared stiff going into the circle. I don't feel like throwing up before it starts or anything like that. But there is a lot of planning, and I decided to charge £10 a person for the circle. And I feel that that's the right amount of money for the investment that I'm making. I know it's not, it's not a huge amount. I charge more for my yoga classes, but it just feels right. It feels comfortable. It's something that I want to do. I'm enjoying it. And while that's the case, I'm prepared to put the time, energy, and an effort into it. It's a really special evening once a month, and it feels special for me. And I think that's a big difference between the last time there was a circle held in my studio. I think I've learned in the last 5 years so much about creating a space that is also a space for me. This is a circle that I'm benefiting from as a facilitator. I'm getting huge amounts out of it. And I think previously, when I was in circle, I felt like my responsibility for the circle was so big that I couldn't participate in the way that I am now.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, giving us an insider's view of what it's like to run a circle and to get a new one going.
Yeah, and I think there's a real difference in what we do. We run online trainings and we run in person, and they're both amazing. That's what I say. We're amazing, but I love both of them. I really love online. I come out of the online sessions really buzzing, thinking, "Wow, that was lovely," and then there's that whole difference of kind of meeting someone in person and like seeing their flesh and bones. And I think that they're both equally valuable, very different, and special in their own way.
Yeah, I think also it's about being able to share food when you're in person, isn't it, as well? Like the London Immersive. Last time we cooked all sorts of goodies, and it was lovely to share those. And then for the retreat that's coming up in the autumn, again, to be able to sit for meals and have that, yeah, more free-flowing talking outside of the circle is also really important. It takes the community to a different level.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. Long may your circle continue, Julia.
Thank you. It was really lovely unpacking it with you and having a chat about it.